This is TPG Live, and I'm Jeremy Horn, also known as the Product Guy, and we're about to begin. This is your stage, no matter where you are in your product journey, from startups to Fortune 500s, interns to CEOs, we're a global community that values every voice. TPG Live is a show where everyone, both on and off camera, is encouraged to join in and shape the conversation with your insights, your questions, your topics. Just hop in the chat room and I will strive to include as many of your comments as possible within the broader conversation in real time. Today, the on-camera portion of our roundtable is joined by Garrett Lang, who spent 8 years in EdMarTech, graduated from GE's CIO training program, and reported to the CIO of the business units there that made $250 million in profit. Garrett worked at PwC in a joint venture with Google as head of product and engineering. This Cornell CS grad, with a concentration in AI, can currently be found at PlateRate, a company he founded to help diners earn credit on restaurants' top-rated menu items. And then there's Emil Shah. With 7 years of experience across capital market functions from trading to regulatory compliance, he specializes in enhancing developer experience for enterprises, driving digital transformation and modernization as product lead at the Compute Fabric FinTech Cloud Solution at RBC Capital Markets. In Emil's free time, he co-organizes the Hip House, fostering collaboration amongst all the key players in Toronto's startup scene. Today on TPG Live, we'll be discussing stakeholder dynamics and personal branding for product managers. Ask yourself, how do you handle situations where leadership seems to be focused only on immediate wins? And how do you craft your own personal brand to attract new opportunities while also growing influence and trust in your organization? Join us in the chat room and at the roundtable as we discuss all this and much more coming up next on TPG Live. All things product management, connecting you with industry leaders, trendsetters, and a global community of insights and unique perspectives. This is the Product Way. Hello. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TPG Live, joined by Garrett and Emil. You guys, did I leave anything out in the introduction that I just did? Anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you got that.
Yep, sounded good.
All right. So as I like to start every one of these TPG Lives, I'd like to start with kind of an icebreaker, a question of the night, as you might say. And so for today's question of the night, question of the day, depending on what part of the world you might be joining us, is to everyone, what would people be most surprised to learn is a source of inspiration for you? Or I guess put another way is, what is your most unexpected source of inspiration? Emil, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think, this actually might not be as unexpected, but for me it is. And I would say is customer service representatives. Especially when you think about like product, right? You need to be able to have empathy. And I think customer service does a great job having that customer empathy. They understand how to deal with the customer, understand their frustration at real time. And, they're kind of the first ones to get the bad news, right? About whether it's a product or a bad service or something going wrong. And I think, looking at how they deal with tough situations with the customer, understanding they are minutes away losing a valuable customer and losing revenue for the company, and being able to kind of navigate that conversation and retaining them. I think I learned a lot from them on how they do it. And honestly, I used a lot of, their script on my day-to-day job as well.
Cool. Garrett, how about you?
Sure, I'd say maybe it's unexpected because it's a flaw. My impatience. I don't like repetitive tasks. I don't like non-value added tasks. I like to get right to the heart of something. And because of that, I try to make my products more user-friendly, intuitive, and beautiful, and avoid the need to ever do things that are repetitive. And I try to make my users' life easier for that reason.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Um, uh, so I guess a very very inward inspiration,
Yeah.
inward driven inspiration there. For myself, I've got a bunch, but uh, different depending on what kind of inspiration sometimes I'm looking for. It could be walking around a museum, just looking at paintings, trying to see different perspectives of how people have been looking at things. Read a science fiction book. Sometimes I like to have my kids try to explain my problems to me, or what do they think the solutions are. Sometimes kids have a great way of finding a way to simplify something, or kind of cut to the obvious part of the problem, or an obvious way to get to it. Another thing I also like to do, and we were talking a little bit before the show about this, is I like to have conversations with the chat AIs out there. I find that even when they're wrong, they're still a good bit helpful. I like to, like, if I might ask ChatGPT to write something up for me. Even when it's wrong, it's helpful because then at least I can say, "Oh, this is what was wrong," and I can then iterate from there and figure out and then fix it myself. So I find you still need some of that subject matter expertise, but sometimes it just helps you make a connection that maybe you were missing, or kind of get started in a place where you might not have been thinking previously. Um, so those are my those are my sources of inspiration there. But with that said, for those of you joining us in the audience, feel free to post your questions, post your comments throughout the show, and I'll do my best to kind of work them into the conversation and give as many people a chance to participate both on and off camera as possible. And especially as we dive into our first topic here tonight on stakeholder dynamics, or stakeholder management, or managing up, or dealing with top level management, however you want to say it. And so, the way I kind of just wanted to start is to Garrett or Emil. I'll see if one of you wants to jump in. Otherwise, I'll call in you myself. I wanted to kind of start with talking about managing expectations for senior leadership. How do you approach situations where senior management pushes for features without clear evidence of a market need? How can PMs balance these requests with the product's long-term strategy? Emil? I didn't even give you a chance to jump in. I just called on you.
No worries. Yeah, no, I think that's a challenge, right? And especially when, senior leadership vision and your vision don't align, right? And there's no necessarily data to back that up as well. Because especially as a product lead, you're much more closer to your customers as well, and you work with them on a day-to-day basis. I think it's important to have that open conversation with senior leadership and understand the reasoning behind it. I think the biggest thing is, like, sometimes we don't ask questions why, and maybe we might get in trouble, but I think it's important to ask why. I think earlier in my career I didn't do enough of that, right? It's like, hey, like, why is this our strategy going forward? What is the vision that you're seeing, right? And then being transparent as well with the customer data that we have on hold, right? And saying, hey, these are the gaps, they're not aligning, and maybe they're seeing something that I'm not, right? And they might be looking at it more from a holistic dynamic standpoint, and where kind of the market is going, where the world is going, right? And sometimes as a product manager, you can be very much more so focused on your customers, you don't kind of step out and understand where things are in the broader picture, where things are going. And I think so, yeah, like, having that open conversation and disagreeing, it's okay to disagree with senior leadership. I think they're looking for that. It's not always about painting a happy story. It's about, hey, like, disagreeing, and having those tough conversations is key.
Yeah, I agree that where senior leadership definitely can bring a new perspective, or definitely they're in meetings you're not. or they might be in meetings you're not, or be exposed to information you're not, and so they can bring that unique perspective. But I want to go back to you though. Is what do you do when they don't? When those whys, or you're asking why 5 times or so, and the answers are kind of ringing empty. Like, how are you handling that?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I think, it might not be clear now, right? But I think it's like, okay, put the trust in senior leadership as well, especially if they've been right in the past, right? It's like, okay, put the trust in senior leadership and where that goes, right? And maybe the answers will be clear, right? And it's tough to do that because sometimes it's like, you're shoving your ego, you're shoving what you truly believe in away, right? But see, is their theories correct, right? And then two things will happen if that strategy is not right, right? And the results and the KPIs will speak for themselves. So, we can go back and see, okay, are they willing to pivot and change their mindset? And if not, right, and if it is a situation that is hostile, and maybe, maybe that might be a sign saying, hey, it's time for my next journey, right? No, it's true, but it's
To the
not giving up.
afterlife?
Yeah, it's like, okay, maybe, it's okay. I'm ready for my next journey and opportunity as well, right? Where the culture might not be fitting, and that's fine. And that happens every day.
Yeah, sometimes I think sometimes for myself, I've been able. I can kind of nudge folks to maybe experiment or some tests to try to validate it, especially if the whys are feeling weak. But at least that's where I try to get everything in generally to an experiment or a test. Just my core philosophy. Garrett, what are your 2 cents on this?
So I would say earlier in my career, I would have just pushed back hard on senior management and fought the good fight. But now I've learned to sort of step back and say, hey, that's an interesting idea. Why don't I run it by some customers? And then in those conversations with customers, I would bring up some of the things that were at the top of my roadmap, and then say, well, what out of these things would you prefer? How important are they? And try to record those meetings with the customers so that I can then show those to senior management. And if it's the customers saying senior management's idea is bad, then it's not me versus them, it's them versus the customer, and who's going to win between the two. And only a really egotistical leadership is going to say the customer is wrong, although theoretically there's always that saying of if I'd asked, Henry Ford saying, if I'd asked what the customer wanted, they would have said faster horses. And sometimes the customer doesn't see as far in the future as maybe we or senior management does. But I think if we do a good job communicating ideas, we'll be able to communicate that future possibility in a way that the customer would appreciate. So yeah, I would kind of step out of the way and let the customer speak.
Yeah, you kind of jumped to my follow-up question right there. What about when the customers are wrong? But I guess the way I kind of want to rephrase maybe that question to you is not so much about if the customers are wrong, but a lot of times maybe the way I like to think about it is not the customers might not know how to solve their problems, but are we working on the right problem? So I guess where in a scenario where maybe a feature is being pushed from top management, which is something I think we can all relate to. Um, how do you get to the meat of it? Like, how do you get to maybe de-escalating from a feature and getting engaging with the customers, finding out what you need from the customer, but not where you're necessarily pushing a feature, but maybe exploring a problem. Like, how do you kind of shift that conversation?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah, my question is, like, if you're getting pushed on a specific feature from senior leadership, but how do you kind of maybe push past that, because you might not get necessarily clear feedback, clear guidance from your customers on specific features, but maybe problems, maybe something else.
Yeah, and someone in the chat mentioned that they ask about problems too, and definitely that's where I start, is asking about the problems that customers are facing. If the feature that senior management wants is solving a meaningful customer problem, then it'll probably be appreciated by them. And so I'm kind of, when I gave my answer, I was assuming we'd already done the groundwork, know the problems of the customer, and now we're coming back to them with solutions that help meet those problems. And hopefully senior management's feature request is solving a meaningful problem for the customer. If not, it's probably not going to get very good feedback from the customer. And I always want to be open that I may be wrong, right? And maybe the customer is going to say, hey, this senior management idea is great. And so by sharing it with the customer, we get to the meat of whether or not it really has legs. But every feature should be solving some sort of problem. I actually developed my own methodology the same year Agile was created, called Planned Agile, and it's all centered around solving a meaningful problem. And every feature has to have a problem. Otherwise, we don't try to spec out a feature without having a problem we're trying to solve for it.
Is Planned Agile you invented?
Well, I didn't call it Planned Agile until I learned about Agile, but I developed a methodology somewhat similar to Agile, but with more planning involved, so that you don't have the ambiguity. Like a lot of people, when they develop something with a user story, there's too much ambiguity and you get a lot of rework. So with the way that I develop software, we don't generally get much rework. It's usually right the first time.
I like that, where so basically everything always has to get connected up to a key problem that you're working to solve.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. Any articles on it, or is it just a core philosophy we're sharing with everyone now?
So I teach it at the Product Gym. I'm one of the instructors at Product Gym, and so I teach that there, and then I have my own product management boot camp where I teach it as well. So
excellent.
I don't have any articles because it's sort of proprietary stuff, but I do teach it to people that want to learn. So
excellent. By the way, it looks like you have a good fan group in the comment section here. I see Mertzia is here. Mertzia has got a question for everyone, so let me put that up on the screen. And Mertzia is asking, how might you reset expectations, alignment goals with a stakeholder mid-project when things are underway but not aligned, and feels awkward to go back and reset the relationship? Emil, let's go to you.
Yeah. So in my experience, when things are not going the way you had projected, right, I think it's important to bring that to the stakeholder earlier on in the conversation, right? So if there's something end of the quarter or end of the year, right, you have certain metrics, certain measurements you want to hit, and the data is showing, okay, we're having issues, and you've analyzed why. What is the challenge? Maybe adoption rate is slow. Customers did not anticipate the product as they would have liked to. Whatever the case would have been, you want to bring that to the stakeholders much earlier on, right? And if they know that earlier on, then I think it's easier to set expectations of where things are going. If you bring in the last hour, it doesn't look great on any of us, and it's just harder to swallow, and it's harder to strategize as well, right? It's harder to have that open dialogue. So I think that's the key, is just to have those conversations earlier on, and even leadership too. It's make sure that if there are challenges, if there are issues, you bring them out earlier, right? Because at the end of the day, they can help you guide you to the right direction so we can get back on track.
Garrett, are there some strategies that you found effective in this kind of scenario, or even more so when you're having to say no, or you have to really push back against these high-level management requests?
Yeah, I guess the pushing back, I usually look for who is the representative that would be equivalent in senior management that would have a different opinion, because usually the CFO has different opinions than the COO has different opinions. And so I try to play a little bit more of verbal judo, where I say, oh, well, let's talk with the COO about that. That's an interesting idea, but he had this, or she had this idea that would then contradict what the first person said. I set them up with each other to get the conversation between the two people who would be in conflict. If there's a senior leader that I think is off base somewhere. But as far as if a project with stakeholder expectations isn't being met, I'm a big believer in documentation, meaning like write down what everybody wants and come to agreement on what's going to happen. Be willing to acknowledge mistakes and be willing to say, look, this happened, we're sorry that it happened. This is why it happened. You have to know why it happened. And if you have a good reason for something going south, then, management is usually going to be fairly understanding of that. If you just say, we don't know why it went south, then they're not going to be so understanding. So it's important to ask the questions why. And then when you reset expectations around new requirements that might be being, have not been, understood before, I recommend giving yourself plenty of time to get things right the next time. And you will usually get 2 chances, but you don't always get a third.
You both have such a healthy point of view on senior management. I'm impressed. It speaks something for the career paths that you both have been on. I like that. I want to kind of get into, when we're talking about stakeholder management, we're a lot of the time, especially when you're talking about it intersecting with product management. We're talking about influencing without authority in many cases. So, Emil, how can product managers effectively influence top-level stakeholders when their vision doesn't align with what the senior leadership is asking for? What tactics have worked for you in gaining buy-in?
Yeah, I think, when you want to influence senior management, I think the biggest thing is trust, right? Building that trust with senior leadership. And you do it by, a lot of different ways. One, I think, one is key, and I kind of touched upon it, is, having that, building that transparency with senior leadership, right? Whether it's consistent reporting, consistent documentation, consistent just measurement of how we're progressing in terms of overall goals, and having that conversation when we run into challenges or challenges we might be running into the future as well. I use that senior leadership as mentors as well, to provide advice, because they've been through this. They've actually seen this and many times. So they actually have the answer to it. And we might be afraid to ask, and we get to the answer later, right? So I think for me, it's like, okay, be transparent, make sure you do your due diligence, right? Don't go into a meeting without any data, right? Make sure you have your data, you have a plan, and if there is a challenge and a problem, make sure you come with a solution as well, a proposed solution, right? It's like, hey, I have a problem, tell me what to do. It's like, no, I have a solution, and then they can help you revise the solution as well. So I think that's the biggest key.
Yeah, Garrett, do you have other tactics that have worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think creating a crystal clear vision for what it is that we want to do, and then having all the stakeholders in a room. This is part of what I teach, is to get like a stakeholder gathering where they see a crystal clear vision of what I want to implement, and then I'm going to let the stakeholders that agree with me fight the ones that don't agree with me, and hopefully that will get the senior management on the same sort of direction that I would want to go in. Now, I also have to be open to the fact that maybe no one's going to champion it, right? And that hasn't really happened very often, if at all. But we should always be open that we might be wrong. And but creating that crystal clear vision and then watching stakeholders kind of comment to each other has been the most effective way, because often they don't know a lot about each other's processes. And so they learn about each other's problems in that conversation. And then they suddenly have a realization that, what I was proposing was something that, I had spent time with a stakeholder that they didn't know that stakeholder's processes. And so once they realize that they have a major pain point that's being solved, then suddenly they can be more convinced.
Got you. Do you have advice? You mentioned about going in with a crystallized vision. Do you have any advice for people in actually crystallizing that vision?
Yeah, I mean, that probably would take, I'll try to give a 30,000 foot summary, but, like that's part of what I teach in Planned Agile, to be honest, is how do you create that crystal clear vision? That's the course that I teach in about an hour, or maybe hour and a half or 2 hours in product gym. But basically the simplest version is you want to have everything, documented such that when you walk through the documentation, there's no longer ambiguity. And it can be designs, it can be prototypes, it can be clickable prototypes, it can be, basically you want to think about all areas of ambiguity and try to eliminate them, and have, and that's what creates that crystal clear vision. So I think that's the best I can do with a very short period of time. So.
Yes, we'll probably save a deeper one for a more in-depth conversation on product vision at a future event. Emil, what communication techniques have you found most useful when presenting a counter argument to a CEO or VP who has a different product vision for the product's direction?
Yeah, I think one, you don't want to be too confrontational, for sure.
You don't start with you're just wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you just say no and stomp your feet a lot, I think.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. No, I think, yeah, you don't want it to be a hostile or in any way, shape, or form. And I know that's obvious. That might be obvious to a lot, but it is something where, like, hey, it's not, because senior leadership doesn't necessarily understand your vision, right? And they have kind of a completely different route, doesn't mean that they don't agree with you, right? I think my thing is always trying to understand where they're coming from, right? So I think I'm having that empathy that we mentioned, right? And I think it's also the dynamics, right? Like, you don't want to have that back and forth maybe in a meeting with multiple individuals. Sometimes it's better to just have it offline, right? And be like, hey, just trying to understand, where we're coming from, why we're going this way, what is the disagreement about, right? And I think people will appreciate that more, when you do it offline. And I think
any advice for when you don't have that opportunity to do it offline?
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough, right? That's tough. I think I'll take a page out of Garrett's book, right? Is like, there's a good chance that there's someone else who has the same opinion as me, right? And so I'll let them chime in as well, and let them to kind of take the reins and fight that battle in a cordial way. I think that is key, right? But yeah, it's just important to have that disagreement without, emotions getting involved. I think that's key.
So the human shield approach. Got it.
Yeah.
Garrett, there was a follow-up question to, I think, some of your agile planning that you were just talking about from Stephen Curry. He was asking, do you see your approach more as taking on the task of sorting this out for your higher ups, or as a collaborative process with them?
So I like to follow what I call the modified platinum rule, which is I make a little modification to it, which is treat other people the way they want to be treated. And then the modification I make is, as long as there's not a good reason not to. And so what that answer means, Steve, and good to see you, by the way, is that I want to do whichever of those two my higher ups want me to do. If they want to be collaborative, I'm going to make them a part of the collaboration. If they want me to just fix it for them, then I'm just going to try to sort it out myself and, include them as needed. So I think it really depends on the person that, that I'm, the type of senior management that you have.
Got you. Gary, I want to continue with another question about kind of looking at the short and the long term
Yeah.
visions. Um, and, and I think this is definitely an area. This is a question I'm very interested in seeing what everyone's got to say. Especially, it's definitely one of those thornier things that people run into is how do you handle that situation where leadership is really just more focused on the short term immediate wins, but you're trying to stick with what you believe and sticking to that long term product strategy. Um, how do you manage that? How do you ensure both needs are met? Should you be ensuring both needs are met? Um, do you just ignore the short term need?
Um, I don't think you can in
Need.
that a lot. I don't think you can in that a lot of the short-term needs, at least that I find as a product person, are responsiveness to customers and things that, they're like, well, this needs to be fixed, not a bug, but, I had a product that I inherited that had customers going into like 200 like check boxes or like numbers that they had to type in, and they had to evaluate each line to figure out whether or not to move it up or down, and it was a nightmare. You have to fix stuff like that as a short-term solution because your customers aren't going to live with that for too long, if it's really messy. And so what I do is I generally take my bandwidth, my developer bandwidth, and I split it in half. Half of it is dedicated towards short-term things and responsiveness, and senior management short-term thinking can go into there, as well as responsiveness to customer pain points with the product. And then I put the other half towards long-term visionary types of things that, I've gotten a lot of buy-in and feedback from both customers and senior management that are important, and they all want to see those, but they kind of get sprinkled in, and that way, you're really handling both the short term and the long term simultaneously. And you
One
have
of
to
the
set expectations accordingly for how quickly things go, because when you take half your bandwidth for short-term stuff, then the long-term stuff goes slower, and you got to set those expectations right.
I think often also you're dealing with these short term wins, which are really just in a lot of cases Pyrrhic victories, in which or kind of they feed a vanity metric. So are you setting a do you find that you set aside time short term wins on kind of these vanity metrics? Or are you still making sure that the short term win still aligns with the long term goal, or are you just saying, hey, they want this, they call this a win, they want this win, I'm just going to set aside, I don't know, 10%, 20% for miscellaneous?
So I'm not so like I'm a very purpose driven person. So I don't like to do things that don't actually add value. So I would probably try to bring that up in I have these stakeholder meetings where I get all of my stakeholders in a room together, and I would put one of those things up, and whoever it was that wanted that vanity metric has to defend why they want that in front of all the other people who have real meaningful needs that they need met. And usually those things get shot down when you have a group of stakeholders. If for whatever reason someone is the CEO and they feel really strongly about it, I'm not saying I would never do it, but I usually try very hard to eliminate anything that's just a checking the box, and I'm going to look good, but it doesn't actually add value to someone's life. If it's not adding value to someone's life, I don't want to spend my time on executing against it.
Emil, how do you handle this short term, long term dance?
Yeah. I think I think you want to look at these immediate wins and understand, are these immediate wins actually going to actually help enable the long term vision and strategy? Like Garrett said, if there's a bug or the product is itself inherently from engineering standpoint not great, then it makes sense to put resources there, right? Just so we're on the right track. Or it might be, hey, we're going to implement certain capabilities and features so we can abstract and onboard new clients. And that might generate more revenue, right? Now, obviously, that can hurt us in the long term as well if we're changing where our vision is going. But then we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, if we're seeing increase in revenue, or will this actually help enhance and enable where we want to go, right? So I think it's really understanding, are these immediate wins going to actually push us forward to our long-term strategy, or actually are these immediate wins actually detracting from where we want to go, right? I think that is the key that's what I would want to evaluate.
How do you communicate that if it is detracting? I think a lot of these short-term wins might be, maybe. How do you communicate? How do you navigate that conversation?
Yeah, I think you want to showcase the impact it's going to have. You want to clearly define the impact it will have in the long term, right? In the immediate, yeah, we can see, okay, this is helping our company and our business a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. What is the impact of the decisions we're making today, right? In terms of our customer growth, retention, revenue, right? And I think when you can clearly lay that out, and obviously it's a projection, but when you can lay that out to senior management, then I think they can maybe take a better look and understand, okay, do we really want to do this? Especially if that story is not great.
Gotcha. Anastasia had a question. She wanted to know if there's any example that might be beneficial to achieve both short and long term at the same time. It's a jump ball, so I'll let either of you.
If you don't have one, if you don't have one, I'm happy to jump in on this one. So
go for it,
actually, Anastasia, the example that I gave before was one such example. So what I ended up doing, really, I was originally trying to make the initial feature, easier to just, mass update those hundreds of rows with some logic. Like if this number is below 2, then I'm going to do that. It was a campaign optimization thing. But then the engineers pushed back against my way of making this much simpler for the user. And this is an organization that was very engineering forward. And the last CEO had been let go because he disagreed with engineering. So I decided not to go that route. And what I did is exactly what you're talking about. I created a new feature that allowed an AI algorithm to optimize the campaign and not require having to touch any of those hundreds of rows at all, because it all got automatically optimized. And doing that solved the short-term need that people didn't have to, optimize 200 rows of campaign. And it also grew our long-term roadmap to make the optimization, highly autonomous. And still there were ways that if someone wanted to tweak it, we always wanted to give the campaign managers control, but usually they didn't need it, and that ended up doubling click-through rates and the optimization we did. And it was a big long-term win, but it also solved the short-term need. Now, you don't often get to do both at the same time, but sometimes you can.
Emil, in your experience, what are the best ways to build trust with senior leadership so that your input as a PM is valued and taken into account in the decision-making process?
Yeah, I think it's not always, delivering the happy story. It's not always rainbows and sunshine, right? And I think when you have that clear communication with senior leadership, and it's not like, okay, when we have our senior leadership meeting, we're always pointing out, hey, everything is great, we're on track, because data is manipulable. You can manipulate data to look like, okay, things are well, right? And you can always phrase a story in a very positive way, but I believe in, saying it how it is, right? And obviously, if things are not where it went, you want to obviously present, what's the solution? What is the strategy going forward so we can get back on track, right? As it pertains to hitting our goals. But yeah, I think senior leadership, will respect you when you are also, vulnerable and saying, hey, like I made a mistake, right? Like this is the assumptions I made, This is the way why we did stuff, and this is the experiment we ran, and it didn't work clearly. And when you showcase that, I think they're like, okay, like, this individual is willing to admit their mistakes. They understand why they made their mistakes, and they have a plan forward for it.
Great. Garrett, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I agree.
All right. Anything either of you wanted to add on stakeholder management or just stakeholder dynamics before? There's one other question that came from the audience, but I want to wrap this topic first before I go to that question. Anything else either of you wanted to add? Any tidbits or advice that we might not have teased out? All right, we're fully teased.
I guess the one thing I'll just say, and it's probably obvious to everyone here, but I'll say it just to say it because it's important, is, you really need to listen to all of your stakeholders, and your customers are amongst them. And I think if you listen with empathy, then you'll and you're making sure you're addressing the most important needs of all your stakeholders, then you'll be okay. And like I said, if there's a disagreement about prioritization, I get the stakeholders to talk to each other about the priorities, and not always try to be the bad guy that set the priorities. Otherwise, you're going to put yourself in front of a lot of frustrated senior stakeholders.
Get the stakeholders to talk to each other. Oh my gosh. This question comes from Tejas. So it's a little bit different separate from the topic, but I thought it would be a good question to kind of pose before we go to our trivia section. Tejas has kind of two comments. I'm going to try to mush them together. Tejas asked, I was wondering, what do you think about empowered product teams and its view against traditional management styles? And he goes on to ask, basically, Tejas is, I'm aspiring to get into upper management, directorial levels eventually, but wonder if finding that empowered team is company dependent, and whether I'd have to find that kind of company first. Garrett, let's start with you.
Sure. So I'm assuming what you mean by empowered product teams is that the product teams get to make the decisions without what we were talking about before, where senior management is deciding to come in and give their opinions. I think it does depend on the company culture, and what I would recommend is asking employees of the company what the culture is like before you decide to apply there. I find if you ask people, and this is actually part of my job search video on YouTube under the Free Thinker Institute, which is my not-for-profit, I gave a job search techniques video, and part of what I recommend is networking your way using LinkedIn to the companies that you may want to work for, and having informational discussions with employees there to see whether or not it's really a place that you want to work with, and if the culture is the way that you think it is, or that you would like it to be. And doing that will get you a sense of how autonomous is product in that organization, by talking to product people that are there and understanding what it's like for them. So I would say you kind of have to vet the company to see what their style is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you can, Garrett, we've got requests for lots of the stuff that you've been mentioning. So if you can post some links afterwards to the comments or elsewhere, we'd love to get them out to folks. Emil, anything you want to add there?
No, I think Garrett hit it on the nail. You want to look at the culture, right? Some teams are more engineering led, and some teams are more product led. And even my company that I worked for, we were very, and especially our team, it was very engineering led for a long time. And then there was a switch where, okay, now we need to be more product led, because there's a lot of technical debt. We weren't really thinking about the problem from a customer standpoint. you need to do your due diligence, right? If you want to build a successful product. And so I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, is it a product-led, product mindset organization? And if it is, that's where you want to be.
Excellent. All right. So with that said, we're going to transition to our trivia. Our trivia segment of the night. Just remember, I'll be asking the question. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves, but don't say the answer. Don't write the answer. I'm looking at you in the chat room as well. Don't write the answer. We'll get to the answer section after the second topic. Second topic we've got here. So let's get into the trivia question of the night here, and that is, which company popularized the concept of growth as a discipline? Once again, which company popularized the concept of growth as a discipline? And the music stopped. So that means I'm done asking the question. Garrett, Emil, maybe you've got some thoughts in your head. You might have to go back in time a little bit, or more than a little bit, depending on your perspective and journey through the tech world. Once again, for everyone, which company popularized the concept of growth as a discipline? That's the question, and we'll get to the answer at the end of the show here tonight. But for everyone who's here, don't type the answer. Don't type the answer. But feel free to I don't know, say anything except the answer, if you wish. So for our second topic here on the show today, we're talking about PM. We're talking about PM branding, or developing your own personal brand, your PM persona within an organization. So perhaps a good way to get started here is I'll just kind of ask. I'll start with you, Emil. Do you have any kind of quick or practical tips for someone starting to build their personal brand as a PM?
Yeah, I think first you want to understand what is your expertise, right? Especially in this market, companies and organizations are looking for individuals who specialize in a specific industry. And even though you might be starting off your career, there is an area that you know more about. There's an area that you pay attention to. There's an area where you work more, even if it's personal projects or past internships, whatever experience. So you really want to understand which sector do you really you find yourself in. Then second, I think LinkedIn is very underrated. I feel it shouldn't be, but it's, LinkedIn is so key, right? And once you build that brand and you put it on your LinkedIn header, the next thing you want to do is make sure you're contributing content, I probably don't do enough of this either, but it's posting on LinkedIn, right? Your thoughts on the market and the trends, right? Your thoughts on product management, especially when it comes to your expertise, whether it's fintech, SaaS, whatever the case it might be. Putting that content out is key because you're going to get attention from recruiters, you're going to get attention from leaders, and I think just being consistent with that is going to be great. And third is just networking as much as you can, right? Just every city, meetup.com, Eventbrite. You'll see a lot of tech events. Even most cities have, their own product organizations. Go to them, talk to as many people as you can, get involved in many things you can. You can even volunteer for these events as well. But that all helps your brand, because you're not just talking about it, but you're living it and breathing it at the same time.
Yeah. Garrett, on building your PM persona, both, I guess, internally as well as externally, why is it important for product managers to actively build their personal brand, both inside and outside the company? And what are some first steps that you recommend?
I mean, I think, I agree with what Emil said. You want to think about what your strengths are and what you want to be known for, and, show those as strengths through your work, your interactions with colleagues. And I think, for me, like, I, I focus more on good execution rather than on reputation building. And I think the good execution is the way that I try to build my reputation rather than thinking about just reputation building, without execution is kind of hollow, right? And so you kind of have to have a conscious direction to which you're executing. And when you execute in the way that, like if you want to be a collaborative and inclusive leader, then include lots of voices into your product decisions, which is what I tend to do. Like I tend to be a much more inclusive, like let everybody have an opinion type of leader. And so that builds a brand as you include people in the decision making process and make them a part of it and make them feel like their voice was heard. Then you start to build a brand around that, using your execution. But I've also seen people who can very successfully build a brand with no execution. I don't know how they do it. That's not my style. But I would say the advice that I would give people is, build your brand by thinking consciously about what you want to do, doing it, and then basically being willing to share with people that that's your goal and that's what you're striving for, and be willing to self-advocate and yeah, that would be my advice.
I've seen plenty of those folks. Jealous of them.
Yeah, they're the politicians.
They're good. I wish I had some of those bones in my body. So Garrett, the executioner, I guess, is the brand. But Garrett, how do you, especially for people they're more junior in product management, they're working on figuring out like they want to develop that personal brand. How do they? How do you advise them determine what their strengths are, or what that niche is that they should be zeroing in on?
Well, I think it depends on what you want your niche to be. Like for example, at one point, I wrote, like on my resume, there was a bunch of like compliance stuff that I did. And I said, I never want to work on compliance stuff again. I eliminated it all from my resume. I don't want anyone to think about me for compliance stuff. Like, please, like I'll hard pass on that stuff. So, the way you craft your documents, like, I had a portfolio, and the things that I showed in my product portfolio were things that were the types of work that I wanted to be involved in. And by making conscious choices about the direction you're going, the reputation you want to have, and then making sure that your actions actually follow suit, that's how I think you can build a reputation that you're excited about, that you're happy with, you're attracting the type of work you want to attract, and you're having the leadership style that you want to have. And as long as it's something that you are in an organization that's a fit for, if you're in an organization that's very top down, like if I was in an organization that was very top down and didn't like collaboration, I probably wouldn't be a good culture fit for that, right? And I have had that happen to me. And so you want to sort of consciously think about what you want to be and who you want to be that person, and then share that that's who you are. And when people see your words are matching your actions, you're going to start to build that reputation.
Yeah, for me, the part that got scrubbed was advertising.
Yeah, I actually have trouble with that too, Jeremy. So it's
I had patents. I had lots of stuff, a lot of good strengths in that area, but that got scrubbed. We've got a good question from the audience, Emil. This one is from Anastasia. Anastasia has what she calls a tricky question, and I like this question. What if a product manager accidentally lost their reputation and gained some media attention because of it? Oh my gosh! Is there any way you would recommend to reestablish their personal brand?
Yeah. That is a tricky question. I'm not sure what we mean by media attention. I guess this can be
I'm assuming not CNN, because then we need to bring professionals in.
right.
But let's I don't know,
Social media,
small press, social. Yeah, let's say social media.
right. Well, I think one is first, don't panic, because it's not gonna make things better. I think
Well,
staying
you're
calm,
gonna panic a little bit. We don't need to say don't. There'll be some panicking, but it'll pass. We'll say
right.
that.
It'll right. Fair enough. It will pass. Try to stay as calm as possible in those situations, right? Um, you know, if the individuals that truly know you, the people you've worked with, for years, worked on many projects, they know you from a work standpoint, but also a personal standpoint, uh, those are the ones who are not going to really worry about it, right? They know who you are, so you don't have to do much explaining to them. It's going to be the ones that maybe you haven't had a lot of interactions with, or maybe you're already on a bad foot with someone, and this might, cause even more of that drift between the two. I think in that case is I don't know. This is tricky for me. I just own up to it. It's like, hey, made a mistake. It happened. Not my brightest moment, but I learned from it. This is not who I am, and I'm willing to prove and make sure that that this is not me going forward, and making those changes, right? And it's just the way how you might even lose trust with the senior management because product or a project didn't go so well, right? A release didn't go well, whatever the case is, right? Owning up to your mistakes, owning up what you did wrong, and what is the plan, and moving ahead. I think as much as it hurts, just putting that one foot over the other, and just continue to go. And I think that's how you build respect.
Yeah, in product, trust and credibility are everything. And I'd say, unfortunately, and I'll go to the fortunately part too. Unfortunately, once those are lost, especially within a company internally, those are, I'd say, infrequently regained. And that's just the reality of the world. That said, even with media attention, whether it's Instagram or I don't know Facebook, I don't think anyone. I think Facebook, if anything happens there, you're fine. No one's looking. But any kind of like media attention, I say shy of CNN because I can't get into that level. I'm not that skill level. Um, but people aren't going. You're in a bubble when you're in your company, and you go to another company. There's a good chance they haven't seen it. You have an opportunity to start anew, learn from those mistakes, whatever they were that damaged it, or even demonstrate how you learn from those mistakes in an interview if it kind of comes up that way. So there's always a sunny side. After that, the sun will come out after that storm there. Before I guess I'm writing some song now. I guess, but uh, sometimes like it is the solution. You might have to move on to a new organization, but at the same time, it's within that new organization that you might be able to kind of get that tabula rasa, as my Latin teacher would say, a clean slate. Garrett, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, there are times, and I have actually met people who have, through no fault of their own, actually they were doing good things, but they were put in a bad light for doing good things, because if you call out some bad behavior by people who are influential enough, they're going to come after you. And I actually know a guy that can help with those types of situations. So if anyone has like, a situation where if someone Googles your name, then bad stuff comes up, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can connect you with a guy that is a reputation management person that can actually help with that. So there is a whole profession around that. Apparently, I met him networking, and then I interestingly met someone who needed exactly what he does, because of, like I said, being calm out bad behavior by influential people. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, we're going to be sharing a lot of links from Garrett after the show today. We have another question that has come in from this one from Alvin. Alvin wants to. This is great. Alwin, sorry. This is a great question. What are some ways introverts can build their personal brand while continuing to be their true self? Whisper. No, I'm kidding.
So,
Garrett,
yeah.
take that one.
Yeah, so I actually used to be an extreme introvert in my earlier career days, and I realized that I needed to meet more people that and like as an introvert, I wasn't like it was uncomfortable for me to reach out to people that I had never met and introduce myself, and I was literally like, if you have extrovert here and introvert here, I was like right next to the introvert side. I was about as extreme an introvert as you could have. And I don't. I now am tested out as a slightly extroverted ambivert, and I would say that was because I pushed myself to build relationships with people that, even though it was uncomfortable, with time, I got more comfortable doing that. And so I would say, if you're as extreme an introvert as I was, there's value in sort of recognizing that you shouldn't stay in your comfort zone. I like to say, if you look at comfort as like a circle, and inside that circle is your comfort zone, and those things are easy and comfortable, there's also a greater circle outside of which is your danger zone, where you're incapable of doing those things, and it's absolute insanity to even try. And then in between those two is what's called the growth zone. And the growth zone is uncomfortable. It is not comfortable. You can do those things, and the closer they are to your comfort zone, the better you're going to be at doing them, and the easier it's going to be. But what you want to do is keep yourself in that growth zone. And when you do keep yourself in that growth zone, you can still be true to yourself. And I still have very introverted roots. If I'm going to write an artificial intelligence algorithm, I'm going to sit down in a room that's quiet for 5, 6, 7 hours, and I'm going to turn out an algorithm. But but so you shouldn't feel like you have to be very introverted to be your true self all the time, because some situations just call for pushing yourself to be uncomfortable and not be the introvert. You should still be valued as an introvert, and I'm not trying to say not to. And there's nothing wrong with being an introvert, but it's also worth noting, I think, that you can be yourself, but you can also do things that are uncomfortable that help you further your career. And just being an introvert that doesn't communicate with anyone unless it's absolutely necessary is not a way to grow your career, if that makes sense. So you kind of have to get into that growth zone. And as I got in the growth zone, I found all the people that I thought were horrible and scary turned out to be super nice and friendly, and that's why now I'm more test out slightly extroverted.
Emil?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with the Garrett. You want to be able to push yourself a little bit and, get out of your typical realm and comfort zone. And I think the way to do it is just having small goals, right? Just like, okay, going to a networking event and just being like, okay, I'm going to talk to 2 people, right? Just 2 people, right? And the next time you go, it's like, okay, I'm going to talk to 3 people. And, just adding smaller and smaller goals to it, I think is going to help you. And also, while you're doing that, right, becoming more outgoing, there's other ways to build your brand, right? And you can do it digital. So if talking to people in person is not your thing, you can still build your brand on LinkedIn, right? Posting on your thoughts and ideas, giving insights on whatever you're working on, having a Substack, having your Substack and, blogging is a way to build your personal brand and, having a following there, right? There's a lot of people on social media, Twitter, right, who are very vocal there, right? And they have a huge brand there, but in person, they might be one of the quietest people, right? And it's so surprising to me, but it's true. And so yes, I do believe you want to try to get out of your comfort zone in person, but also while you're doing that, you can digitally build your brand as well.
Yeah, and let's do a simple like an introvert versus an extrovert, right? So when an extrovert, you would say, would be recharged by talking to people. An introvert, in that very same conversation, is being drained of all their life force, all their energy in that same conversation. And so when you think about what do you also need to do is build those breaks in, build that decompression time in, and try not to do everything all at once, and try to give yourself resting breaks, give yourself some kind of timeouts to kind of recharge. So while the extrovert might be just plowing along, it doesn't mean you can't accomplish the same things, especially with your personal brand, as the extrovert. Like I reported to in my last senior leadership role, I reported to another leader who saw himself as an introvert. He was an amazing leader, very well respected, and my boss. He was an introvert, but he managed over 50,000 people. And for him, it just meant, he's gonna do his speech, he's gonna do his presentation, he's gonna post some articles, he'll give some keynotes, but there's gonna be some breaks built into that old schedule throughout the day, and really intentional opportunities to recharge. So it's equally possible. You just have to maybe structure your time, or structure how you approach it a little bit differently. Just be cognizant of your energy level and what your limits are, and kind of work to build it that way.
And Jeremy, if I could, Anastasia mentioned something that I think is worth bringing up, is that introverts are usually the ones that have like the most valuable things to say in the room, and they're the least likely to say them. And so what I would encourage is for the extroverts, and I say this as now an extrovert, but I would encourage extroverts, when you see someone being quiet in the middle of a conversation, ask them their opinion, because you may be surprised at how insightful and helpful and useful it is. Because introverts take everything in, they're assimilating it, and they're forming their opinions. And if you ask an introvert their opinion at the end of a conversation, they're often going to have a really insightful perspective. So I think it's also on extroverts to be asking introverts their opinions.
Yeah, Emil, what are some of the key elements of an authentic personal brand for a product manager? How can PMs align their brand with their professional goals?
Yeah. I think it's really about talking about and aligning your brand about what you care about, right? Like, what is it that you care about? What type of problems do you care about solving, right? Whether it's, using AI to, simplify how we do research, right? Whatever it is, right? Maybe it's healthcare, right? And you care about great healthcare services, right? And how you're going to build a product around that, right? Whatever your story is, whatever, is the reason why, you connect with technology. I think when you start to bring that towards your brand, it's more authentic, right? You have a reason about it. And it's area you researched a lot. You understand the gaps and the pain points in that area, right? And when you have that level of care, I think that's when that's the area you want to build your brand in, and I think that's what's going to help you be successful in that role as well.
Hey Garrett, what do you and when you've seen people developing their personal brand, you've done it yourself. What are some common mistakes you've seen product managers make when trying to establish their personal brand?
I kind of touched on it before, is when they try to say they are something that they're not. And people who watch both actions and hear what someone says together will find out that you're not what you say you are. And as you said, Jeremy, once you lose the reputation for being honest, it's hard to get that back. And so you really want to be authentic and, be yourself, and show that your actions actually mirror what you say you are and who you say you are. Because if there's a disconnect there, people will figure that out eventually. The politicians do manage it fairly well, and I don't know how some of them have gotten as high as they have, but I will say there are some of us that are watching both actions and words, and see whether or not people are consistent. And if you're not consistent, you're gonna see one day that it's a house of cards and things fall down.
It must be golf.
Yeah, I'm not a very good golfer.
No, I skipped that one myself.
Yeah.
Emil, in developing a personal brand, there's one of the key strategies. One of the things you have to do is really work hard to stay up to date in product management. And what strategies do you have in staying up to date in the field of product management, in the field of finance, as you're in, that helps, that contributes to reinforcing that personal brand of yours?
Yeah, I think, I have a lot of different sources of where I learn and get my information from, whether it's podcasts, whether it's in-person meetups, work.
Be specific. Which ones you like? Podcasts, meetups? And you're in
I will
Toronto,
say,
right?
I'll say meetups, right? Like going to, a lot of product organizations in your local city, and doing roundtables. Actually, there's something called Product TO, and it's once a month. And it's not like, yes, we get to network there as well, but then we break into separate rooms. So we actually use the Intuit building here, and we get into conference rooms, and each room is, focused on a specific topic, right? Whether it's like product-led growth, right? Or, how do we deal with senior management? Like there's different topics, and we get into these smaller groups and we talk about, okay, how are we currently dealing with some of the challenges within our companies, right? And you might have someone who works in a SaaS company, an AI company, a hardware company, right? Companies with different cultures. You get to actually understand a lot of the new frameworks they're using. How are they tackling certain challenges, right? And so for me, that has been great, is just going to technology meetups, product meetups, right? And I would say you don't have to go to product meetups as well. You can go, I honestly love going to engineering focused technology meetups, right? And understanding from engineer, how are they explaining the problem that they're building and working towards, right? In terms of solving it. And so you get to learn about that, right? And understand the gaps about their company, what's going right, what's going wrong. And also you can get a little bit insights of how they feel about product managers in their company as well, right? But I think that's key feedback, and that's how I learn.
So help me kind of close the loop here. And so how do those methods for you kind of staying up to date on what's going on in product management and the rest of the field? I understand that. How do you leverage that to basically reinforce or contribute to continuing to develop your personal brand?
Yeah, I think going to those events, I get involved with other projects outside of what I do in my day job, and so I think it's I've been able to host some networking events and got involved with startups as well, who are just getting there, building that product strategy, building their go-to-market strategy, getting to 0 to 1. So I've actually been able to work with a lot of those startups here in Toronto as well, just by networking with them and getting involved, whether it's just advice or, hey, can you look at my pitch deck, or, hey, we need help with solving a problem, and I'm happy to help them, free of charge, and that's kind of helped build my portfolio and just my overall experience as well.
Garrett?
I would say, I'm actually, I'm going through, I don't think they call it, an accelerator type of thing with a company that I'm working with in ed tech, and so that has been an interesting learning experience. So for people who have early stage companies, I think accelerators can be helpful, and there's interesting things to learn and connections to make there. I think I don't have specific sources other than sort of interacting with a lot of product people and sharing best practices. And I tend to be an experimenter, and so I'll with my company sort of run experimental things to try to help us be more successful as a product group. And I'm more of a try stuff out myself and see if it works or not. And maybe that's because I'm a founder now and a product guy. And so I tend to just try stuff and see if it works. And I'm more of a learn through experience kind of person.
Great. Anastasia was asking about roundtable meetups. That for in-person roundtable meetups. I'll do a little plug here in that the product group TPG Live is our virtual instance. The product group, we're in around 12 cities around the world, and growing. And we are known for doing in-person roundtables. So if you happen to, and we're working on trying to bring as many of them back in person post COVID as we can. So a lot of them we do this virtual, but for example, in London, we've got a very healthy community there. Doing in-person roundtable conversations. If you happen to be in a city, which everyone generally is, and you'd like to either help get the product group off the ground there or contribute to your local chapter of the product group, feel free to message me. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn as the product guy. So you can just kind of reach out to me there. And I can work on either connecting you with your local chapter or even work with you if you're interested in spinning one up yourself. We've been doing this for well over a decade, and it's always been key to just make it freely available to everyone, as many people as we can, our roundtable discussions. So feel free to reach out to me and see what I can do to help make something happen there. Emil, let me go to you for this next question. When we're talking about developing our product manager brand, there's the internal brand, there's the external brand. How do you balance those two brands? What sort of distinctions do you make? And so, what are some of the unique challenges that you've faced?
Yeah, so I'm guessing the internal brand is more so the brand that you're putting out in person. Is that correct?
Internal within a company, external the world and community.
Right, exactly. So an external would be essentially how you would on LinkedIn or whichever way you brand yourself on the internet, right? Yeah, I think one is you want to ensure it's consistent, and what you say in person, who you are in your day job or whatever you do, is consistent with what your brand is that you share with the world as well. I think you want to be authentic, and you want to showcase that both are aligned. And I think sometimes that can be challenging because you might have a lot of different interests, right? So even though you might be working on a very specific product in your day job, in your personal time, you might be interested in other areas, right? So I'm in fintech, but I'm also interested in SaaS and AI and a lot of the other areas, health tech. and I like to learn a lot about that, and I even give my opinions and ideas on it, right? So I think that's sometimes a challenge, right? Is like, what is your brand versus what are your interests? And a lot of the time they are aligned, but you might have multiple interests, right? That might not be your key expertise and focus as well, right? So I think that's where the challenge is, but it's always good to kind of loop it around and see at the end of the day, how does that impact you, right? I think all these different areas, fintech, health tech, SaaS, they're all these different areas are connected to each other. They're all reliant on each other, right? So I think it's really closing the gaps and showing the relationship between them.
Gotcha. Garrett, what sort of distinction do you make between kind of the internal versus external brand, and what sort of challenges have you had to juggle there?
So I guess I don't think that the brand for me is any different, right? For internal versus external, maybe the ways or the channels are very different, and the like what I want to, what do I want to be known for, is consistent within the company versus outside of the company. So I guess I would just say the I'm more focused on the mechanisms of putting that message out there. Does that make sense? And for me, I'm all about innovation and process improvement, right? And we used to say at GE, like, if you automate a broken process, you just create more problems faster, and that's not a good thing, right? So I always try to fix a process, then automate it, so that way I'm automating a streamlined process, which comes back to my like being annoyed by repetitive tasks. I try to make sure there are no repetitive tasks, the process is smooth, and then doing that internally is about delivery internally, but sometimes so I guess I don't know if that is answering your question. I think it's more about the channels rather than the brand, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's my 2 cents on the topic. I think it's helpful. It's great when the internal and the external branding line up. Um, I don't. They don't necessarily always line up. Maybe externally you're talking about your brand is taking some of my own stuff, talking a lot about the future of product management. But internally, maybe I'm overseeing a database, a SaaS database, and so I really want to be seen as that subject matter expert, and kind of own that niche and be the go-to person inside the organization, because of my internal brand for that, and then outside, anyone who wants to know about the future, that when they're the same, it's great. I think you also have to be cognizant of when they might become in conflict. I've had at different parts of my career where I felt that my internal brand was being nudged in a direction that might be in conflict with my external brand, that I wasn't comfortable with. So I'd make a decision to kind of move on from that situation. But that's everyone's you gotta determine what's right for you. But like I said, it's great when they line up, because then you can use them both to kind of build each other. But then you own different niches. You want to own a niche, command that niche, whether it's a little bit more broadly of just subject matter expertise in product management, or future or some other aspect, or internally something technology related or AI related. There's a lot of different niches and different ways to kind of build that brand. Kind of going back to some of what Garrett, you were talking about earlier, and kind of identify like what that strength is, or what that strength is that you want to be known for that brand. So yeah, I like it when they line up, because that just makes my life easier. I don't always get that advantage. The when you do have a strong brand, though, you can really leverage that to gain influence and trust within the organization. Emil, can you share any maybe examples where your brand has helped you lead more effectively?
Yeah, I think one is, making sure your brand is not too strict or too focused, right? Because then it doesn't really give you a lot of room, right? You don't want to just be like, yes, I'm just this, right? I'm just fintech. You want to be like, hey, you want to make it where it's more innovative. It brings a lot more into the discussion. So I think for me, it was just like, hey, like my brand is not just fintech, but my brand is, helping enterprise companies with digital transformation, right? And building products that make that transition seamless, right? And when I do that, I open myself up to a lot more gateways, right? It's not just the fintech solutions, but it's enterprises in general, right? That deal with that challenge, that need these products, that need that problem to be solved. So that's kind of how I've done it. Is just keeping my brand open and more generic, right? Not obviously you don't want to make it too open because then it's like, what do you really specialize in? But open enough where it allows me to kind of navigate and do things that I'm interested in, and just exposes me to a larger market.
Gotcha. Garrett, what's one thing you'd wish about personal branding you wish you had known earlier in your product career?
I would say like how to like techniques for building a brand. Like I don't think, when I was early on in my career, I wasn't cognizant of that I should be building a brand or how to do it. So I think that I did, I guess, I mean, if you like, I did think about reputation, right? What was my reputation within the organization? And maybe that's the same thing, but I didn't think about like, what do I want to be known for? Like, I didn't, look at myself from the outside, and try to think about how are people viewing me. Now, I definitely established a reputation and brand, but it wasn't through conscious effort. It was more, I just did the best I could at what I had in front of me. And I built the brand I built from that organically. And then also trying to steer towards, I always tried to steer towards the biggest, most difficult problem I could find to get my hands on. And so, but I would say the thing that was missing was even an awareness of brand. I didn't have that.
What do you wish you knew, Emil?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably quite a few that I can't even hone in on one, but I think it's okay when you don't know your brand, right off the top, right? It might mean that you need to do a little bit more soul searching. It's possible that you've worked in a lot of different areas, and so you don't know what really resonates with you. And I think it's okay to kind of go out and figure out what your brand is as you go along, right? And then eventually you'll have that clarity, right? I think when you don't have a brand, it's just like you're still figuring out what you care about and what you're interested in, right? And you just use that data, you use your experiences to kind of guide you on where your brand is, but it's not something you want to stress about.
Yeah, I'd say very early in my career, very long time ago, in my career, I approached my own brand and just as my actions will speak for themselves. And I counted on my successes. I don't need to point out my successes. I don't need to point out accomplishments that people will know. I can be humble about it, but humbleness doesn't get you too far. And so you really need to be the champion of your brand, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. You need to champion that brand. You do need to develop that brand. And it's interesting story. Myself, as the product guy, came out of a meeting I had at work one day, where I was introduced by the head of business development as the tech guy in that meeting. And it was that meeting that then I went home, launched a blog called the Product Guy blog, and wrote all about product management. And I've been writing about product management ever since. I think I launched that blog back in around 2007, 2005, maybe earlier. I don't know. And so that's where the Product Guy came from. It came from me going, okay, time to brand. And now I'm trademarked. So you don't need to go that far, but I think knowing that you need to do that early and be the champion of that brand is critical. So don't lose sight of that. Don't think, oh, it'll happen on its own. It's your career, it's your future. You gotta put time into it, just like you do your product. You are your product, as lots of folks say. So with that said, we're going to transition back to the trivia section. I'll learn how to say that word someday. We'll get into trivia, and because that means if the music's playing, it's the trivia time. And just so everyone remembers, which company popularized the concept of growth as a discipline? Which company popularized the concept of growth as a discipline? See, that's how you know it's still trivia. The music won't go away. There we go. So before I get into the answer, and now is the time if people want to post answers to the question. Garrett, Emil, what do you have for an answer?
I am not 100% sure, but I feel it would be a SaaS company, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a bit broad, but okay. We'll keep it there. Garrett?
So I'm gonna say Anastasia called it Facebook.
Yes. You weren't supposed to look there. All right.
I'm
kidding.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of history here, folks. In 2008, Dropbox launched a referral program that drove 30% of daily signups. Hotmail introduced the P.S. I love you at the end of every email, which drove major user acquisition. It caused people to sign up. In 2010, Sean Ellis invented the term growth hacker. He was famous for he's famous for accelerating growth at Dropbox, but he also did a lot of work at Eventbrite and Lookout. In 2017, Sean published the book Hacking Growth. In 2014, Andrew Chen, many of you may know, of Airbnb fame, wrote the article, Growth Hacker is the New VP of Marketing. And most recently, I'd say over the last few years, the topic of growth is really centered around and explored within the context of product-led growth, a topic we discussed and explored not too long ago. But if you're looking all the way back to the beginning, and you're looking at somewhat of a precursor of sorts, in 2007, Chamath
Palihapitiya.
Thank you. Oh, I practiced and I practiced. I thought I'd get it, but I'm going to just defer to you.
Chamath Palihapitiya.
Chamath was one of the first employees at this company, and he was asked one day, what do you call this thing where you help change the product, do some SEO and SEM, and algorithmically do this or that? And his reply was, I don't know. I just call it like growth, we're going to grow, and so I'll be the head of growing stuff. And so the team consisted of people across product and marketing, data, engineering. They focused on daily active users, and at their core was this strong culture of experimentation. And so which company popularized the concept of growth as a discipline? The answer is Facebook, as Anastasia all too correctly got. So thank you, Anastasia, and Garrett for riding Anastasia's coattails. So great job, everyone. And so I just just looking at the evolution and where it started. I think it's very interesting, kind of how all these things evolve over time. So with that said, though, we're gonna wrap up. So any final comments? Garrett. Final comments. Emil. Let's start with you with any final comments.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me. This was great. Always great to have conversations with product people, and no, I learned quite a bit. And yeah, no, just a quick note, like if you're in the especially if you're in the Toronto area, hit me up. We help do a lot of community building, bring startups in the same room, and help them wherever their next stage is. We're here to really support the startup community here in Toronto. So hit me up if you're in Toronto or even in Canada, and hopefully we can get you connected.
Excellent. Garrett, final comments.
Sure. I would love feedback on the product that I'm building right now with Plate Rate. So with Plate Rate, you can rate menu items at any restaurant in the world, just to see like how much, keep track of how much you liked it, which I found really helpful for myself, because I've out of the thousands of menu items I order, I sometimes forget when I go back to a restaurant what was good and what was bad. With Plate Rate, you never do. And then we also work with some restaurants where we sell their food, and you can get a 60% credit to come back to the restaurant. For anyone in the New York, North Jersey areas, we also have a few restaurants in Florida, and we'll probably have more soon. I would love feedback on the product, of what you like, what you don't like. Feedback from product people is often the most valuable feedback. So, and then, yeah, any information about my not-for-profit that people want to share, like hopefully we can add value to people's lives. And we have interesting events through Zoom every Tuesday evening, and we'll have some links coming out afterwards. I think Jeremy's gonna share some links about both my for-profit and my not-for-profit. So.
A lot of links coming out. We've got so many links coming out of Garrett. It's crazy. We'll get them all out to everyone so that everyone can really benefit from everything Garrett's doing and everything he knows about. So we'll definitely get that. And I want to thank everyone, Garrett, Emil, for your awesome insights, your awesome comments. Great conversation, as well as all our off-camera attendees. I see as part of the roundtable. Just the part that I can't see out there. It's everyone's participation, everyone's comments that really make TPG Live what the product group is all about unique. It's really about hearing everyone's voice, hearing everyone's unique perspectives, and just learning from everyone here. The topics of, we talked about stakeholder dynamics and PM branding. We learned everything from planned agile and influencing without authority, the modified platinum rule. Garrett, if nothing else, is a great marketing and branding person. He's got great names for all these things. We also learned about zeroing in on your strengths, develop that personal brand, personal branding for introverts, which was a great topic, conversation to bring up, and then also just about being the champion of your own brand. And we get all sorts of folks who attend, whether it's our in-person meetups and roundtables or our virtual ones here. So, whether you're an engineer, a new product manager, designer, salesperson, chief product officer, or I don't know, chief anything officer, or just curious about product management, it's your perspectives, questions, and stories that really enrich our conversations. We'd love to have you join us on the on-screen part of this roundtable. So if you're interested, definitely contact me on LinkedIn through as the product guy there, or you can contact me at jhorn@theproductguy.com. We'd love to get you on screen. Everyone's opinion is valuable. When there's as long as you've got you lean in, you've got a strong point of view, you're definitely welcome on the camera here. We're always looking for more topics to cover, and there are so many topics to cover. So if you in the comments below, let me know what else you'd like to discuss. And also, you can really do me a favor. You can do all of us a favor. If you can like, subscribe, enable notifications, and also tell 5 of your friends. Tell 5 of your friends about the TPG Live podcast and the Product Way YouTube channel, and help spread the word for what we're trying to do here and all the knowledge we're trying to share. And again, just a thank you to everyone. I can't wait to explore new topics at next month's TPG Live. And it's just have a great time, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye. See ya.
Hello.